Hi. The irony is not lost on me. Anyways, and today's been a tough day. I've been having a hard time getting together, and the stress is on the I. And it's funny because this is what I was aiming to talk about today is that pronoun. Many years ago, I'm guessing about 1983, somewhere in the early 80s, 1983 perhaps, at the University of Hawaii, when I was a graduate student there, a monk came from Korea, and he came to give a lecture or give a talk or sharing at our university. So I attended him along with many professors, many graduate students, a couple hundred people. And he had a striking presence, this man. Beautiful eyes. I don't know, he just profoundly affected me from the first glimpse. And he has a sense of drama, a sense of timing, a sense of beingness. And he only asked one question. And this was it. He asked, who is I, me, my? And I've talked about this before, but something that just recently happened prompted me to rehash this. And again, who is I, me, my? Well, recently, Mr. Ken Leong, who does a very interesting YouTube page, and I don't have the name of it right in front of me, but Leong, and he shares a lot of good things. And one of the things I saw posted was something about Bodhidharma, who we know here in Taiwan is Damo. Damo is one of my two Buddhas that wash out for me. I have a Western Roger Bacon, a 13th century Franciscan monk. This is the incarnation that I experienced him in, and Bodhidharma. And interestingly enough, Mr. Bacon, Roger, is not to be confused with his better known Francis Bacon. Roger Bacon is kind of known as the father of modern science, but he still was an astrologer. But he talked about the scientific methodology, and really, he was an alchemist as well. So it was kind of had a foot in both, but much empiricism and rational thought is based on some of his work. He's an early scientist, maybe the earliest scientist, hard to say, but he's and I experienced him as a mysterious figure. He's a giant, and he wears whatever the Franciscan robe, the brown robe. It's like this, and he has it up like this, except that his face is in shadow. I've never seen any features, and interestingly, he has no feet. He floats about this far off the ground, but he's 7 feet tall. Never says a word. And my other Damo, which we experience, is this really fierce, frowny face. It's kind of scary guy. In direct comparison to Milafo, the smiling Buddha, this is Damo, the stern taskmaster. But I experience him of all things as a court jester. And he's little in contrast to the large Roger, and he's continually somersaulting and spouting. He doesn't stop talking. Roger Bacon doesn't talk. Dhammo, Bodhidharma, in the Western world we know him as Bodhidharma, in much of the Hindu and Buddhist tradition, Bodhidharma, but here in Chinese it's Dhammo. And he's not incessantly talking, just as a court jester. I imagine a court jester to entertain the king or the emperor. And a continual flow, verbal diarrhea almost. Except that the exception with Dhammo, Bodhidharma, is that every word coming out of his mouth is a jewel, is a wisdom. So he's spouting wisdom in a nonsensical, repetitive, as he's somersaulting. Continually somersaulting. Roger's floating along, not touching the ground because he has no feet, but he's floating around, floating beside me, dwarfing me. And here's Dhammo looking down, and he's on the ground, continually making contact with the ground, somersaulting over and over again as he's talking. So quite the contrast between the two Buddhas. But recently, Mr. Leong, the reason I brought him up is he talked about Bodhidharma, as he calls him, when he was asked a question. And he had a couple questions, but he had similar answers. What is the primary I want to say dogma, but it's not really dogma. Precept. What is the primary precept of Buddhism? Which he said, according to Mr. Leong and according to many history, I don't know. And then so I contacted him again, and I asked Mr. Leong, I messaged him and I asked him, what question did he answer? What was I don't know, was answer to what question? And he said his question that he remembered this time, so he probably used it again. Who is this person in front of you? And interestingly enough, he said, I don't know. So the central precept, the primary precept, the central precept of Buddhism, according to Dhammo, to Bodhidharma, is I don't know. And maybe this was his answer to every question, because another question is, who is this sitting in front of you? Who is that? And I don't know. Well, this monk that I was talking about, Zen monk from Korea, who later on became known as the Korean Buddha. He went on in 1993, born in 1912. My mom was born in 1913. My mom passed in 1999. She didn't see the new millennium, and he passed in 1993. Anyway, so here he was with this commanding presence and carrying a staff. And he looked at everybody. And it was an arena, kind of an amphitheater. And what he did is he circled. He went on the aisle. He circled. He didn't stop. He didn't go up on the stage. There was a stage. He circled the audience around the exit aisles. And come in front and just kept walking slowly, methodically, purposefully, mindfully, you might say. And he asked the same question over again. Who is I, me, my? Who is I, me, my? And some people would give very short answers, and his response would be, I hit you with this stick, his staff. In the tradition, when Zen monks actually hit their students with a stick or with their staff, but he just did it metaphorically. I hit you with the staff, which is I'm rejecting your answer. And then, this was professors. So professors like to pontificate. They like the sound of their own voice. And they would ask these really extensive, long... It's more of a diatribe. There's more of a comment. It's more of an opportunity for them to upstage the question by elaborating, by trying to get their point across. To make it about them is what I really mean. And he would patiently never stop walking. He would patiently listen to the short answer. I hit you with the stick. He'd answer to the long one with the same response. I hit you with the stick. And this went on for more than an hour. And I remember if he didn't walk slowly, it was I almost got dizzy because he was mesmerizing. I just couldn't take my eyes off him. And he just had a commanding presence, is all I know how to relate to you, is that just mesmerized. And finally he stopped up front of the audience and looked at everybody, looked up and down, made eye contact with many people. I remember making eye contact, briefly making eye contact with him. Maybe he could just feel my hunger, because I had a hunger for this spiritual, all my life I had a hunger for this spiritual treasures, and I never missed an opportunity to listen to someone and hear what they had to say. But what he said is, don't know. So whereas Mr. Leong shared with me that Bodhidharma said, I don't know, this monk eliminated the pronoun. It's don't know. And he elaborated a little bit. He said, any answer other than this was disingenuous at best. Speculation, intellectual nonsense, really. It's without sense. And then he smiled and exited the same way that he came. And I just remember how profoundly I was affected. And, recently doing this research, trying to find out more about this man, I did a little research today. It doesn't take long to get at least some cursory information. But one of the things he said was, I was hungry. I was searching. And one of the things he said, now that I can read, no one can help you with this endeavor. Efforts towards enlightenment, it's effortless. No books, no teachers, not even the Buddha. You must work this. You must walk this road yourself. And those of you that listen to any of my sharings know that I've come back to this again and again. This awareness, this understanding of aloneness, this that necessitates a focus on oneself to the point that you can discard everything, ultimately oneself as well. This is when you get the joke. I just read somewhere else recently, why when people are enlightened, why do they have this story of a belly laugh, of laughing so hard? And in my case, when I crossed the threshold from non-abiding to abiding, from impermanent, non-permanent to permanent awakening, that threshold, that portal that you enter, and once you enter, there's no going back. Also, there's no questions. So, if you have a question, if I'm looking at you and you're entertaining questions, you've got work to do. I've shared recently that I became a man of from a man of I transitioned. I evolved from a man of unlimited question, intellectual curiosity, to a man with absolutely no questions. And the only time I had a chance to sit in the presence of someone that I believed was awakened, and I had an opportunity to ask questions, I found that the only response I had is that I have no questions. And here I was with someone that people would give their eye teeth to ask questions to, and I just rediscovered it, emphasized, even given this unique opportunity, I still could only say, I'm sorry, I have no questions. Or I didn't say I'm sorry. I don't have any questions. And I got a big smile from that, biggest smile. And we giggled. This serious man, this man that is a kind of a Dhammo-like character, in that his fierceness is Bodhidharma. Although he told me that he was an incarnation of Milafo, the smiling Buddha. And he told me to pay particularly attention to Dhammo, Bodhidharma, because he said that I'm a reincarnation of Dhammo. And before people start thinking, yeah, great idea, many people can experience, can be an embodiment of Dhammo. Many. And as I mentioned before, due to my mathematical wizardry, 1/100th of 1/10th of 1% of the world's population, which comes out to 73,000 enlightened souls, who could be all manifestations of Dhammo, or not. So when I talk about my Buddhas, says Roger Bacon and Bodhidharma, Dhammo, by no sense am I trying to mislead anyone to thinking that they belong to me. I belong to them. But they can be in many places and be doing many things on many levels and all at the same time. And many different times as well. So, don't know. So in many ways, this Korean Buddhist monk maybe he more unique, maybe was more accurately translating what Bodhidharma said. Don't know. Maybe someone had to stick the pronoun in there, but it was it was noticeable by its absence. Who is I, me, my? Don't know. And you could say the same. That answer, that response, the wisdom, the deep wisdom, is applicable to any question under the sky. Because if you know, knowing is if you know on an intellectual level, you might speculate. You might share your insights. No matter how profoundly or how sincere. They're only your attempts to put words around the world wordless. All that I share can be no better or no worse than my attempts to couch, to frame within language that which is unframable, to capture the uncapturable. But we have to at least talk around it, just to get you going in the path, the pathless path of spiritual awakening. The path that has no path. And there's a time and a place in your evolution which you will uniquely be aware of, knowing when the teacher has taken you as far as he or she can and bows out. Their usefulness. Remember, a teacher is here to help us. Any teacher that asks anything of you is certainly a teacher, certainly a very wise teacher, but not an illuminated, an awakened, a united, a whole being. Because by the very nature of expecting something from you, that's dualism, isn't it? And it's only by the reconciliation of apparent dualistic concepts, reconciliation that they're one and the same. And this is what I was talking about, the great belly laugh, this post that I saw. Why is it so common that people laugh when and it's a belly laugh. It's a deep laugh. It resonates through the universe, I suspect. It certainly felt that way to me. And now I'm using words to couch an experience which is very inadequate, but I want to anyway, I feel the need to, is that when I could entertain opposites, free will, destiny, when I could truly entertain, truly say yes, it's free will, yes, it's also destiny, without imploding or exploding. And it's so simple. This is why I really laughed. It's not rocket science. All of a sudden, you create the environment through forgiveness, which leads to surrender, self-forgiveness, which leads to forgiving all, to self-surrender, the ego, which surrender to all, everything, self, self-love blossoms into universal love. Self-forgiveness blossoms into universal embracing and forgiveness. Self-surrender leads to the true surrender. And until you've gone through those steps, you're not in a position to wake up. But its predecessor, which I neglected necessarily, I didn't mean to forget. All this is predecessor on giving up. It's spirit giving up the idea that you're going to get enlightened, that there's anywhere to get, there's anywhere to go, there's no path to travel. It's this part of self-surrender. The ego first, and then any misconceptions of going anywhere. We're here. That's who this being is. Here and now. There's nothing else. So the belly laugh. It's so simple. When you make the leap, the teacher brings you to the precipice, as I've said, but I want bears repeating. Teacher brings you to the precipice, creates the right vibratory conditions. I liken it to, for lack of anything better, tunes the radio station into the correct station, and then unceremoniously, without a word, turns his, there's one more word, jump. And after jump, the teacher unceremoniously, without fanfare, without another word, turns his back on you. And your days, if you jump, your days with that teacher are complete. He's done or she's done her job. That's it. Brings you to the edge, tell you to jump. The rest is up to you. So in that jumping, there's no questions anymore. And after the jump, when you begin to experience your Buddhahood, when you mature into your Buddhahood, as I've said, my other foray into math is that my experience is that for every year, human year that you're awake is 6 Buddha years. So you do the math. It takes, in 4 years you'd be 24, 5 years, 30? 5 times 6 is 10 times 6 is 6. 5 times 6 is 40, isn't it? 5 times 6, 3 times 6, 5 times 6, 40. I don't know, but do the math yourself. I'm exhausted, and it's not very important to me, except that I do want to share that there's a certain maturity that has to occur after you've jumped. But somewhere in this point of, maybe it happened during the jumping. I guess it happened during the jump. And the thing I'll share with you specifically during the jump is the cosmic, joke. I got the belly laugh. The simplicity. The freedom of finally letting go of expectations, letting go of everything, including yourself. And several other I experienced all my past lives. I've shared before my metaphor of receiving all the knowledge that ever has been, is, and ever will be. You receive that as part of this. So this procedure, it seems a little complicated, but the overriding experience is the simplicity, to wake up, to finally remember the forgotten. It's that simple. It's just like when something occurs to you that you say, where did I put that in? It's this mundane for me. Where did I put that in it? Aha! And this is the big aha, which led to the laughter. But interestingly, I laughed for hours, I suspect, or whoever knows, an indeterminate amount of time. And then it gradually turned to weeping. I mean, the most sorrowful, from almost ecstasy to be bliss, to the deepest levels of sorrow. And I think the sorrow, just as in suffering, people always stress that life is suffering, that Buddhists say life is suffering. It's the separation from life that's suffering. And once you realize that you always have been, you always will be, and you are of everything, of nothingness, of completeness, of incompleteness, this non-divisive, this embracing universal cosmic light, love, peace, joy, this allness. And my tears were for the time, the many lifetimes that I've toiled, my fellow human beings who've toiled and strove and gone through this period of separation, of dualistic thinking and being, the sorrow of the time, the sorrow for those of my other sentient beings that are still laboring under these illusions of separateness and division. And even those that have graduated to seekers who are searching the path or looking for a teacher, all these are equally sorrowful. So laughter morphed into grief, sorrow, despair. From the height to the low, in the course of this experience, all in between, jumping off, blindly jumping off, in the midst of something that you can't see on your bottom. All this happened in that period of time, from jumping till landing. And landing is, when I landed, I was a baby Buddha, a helpless, naked infant on the cold, dark, concrete sidewalk, neglected, utterly alone. This was my initial response. This was the source of this is a source of beginning with a clean slate, born yet again.